And
Right.
look, no one is going to reverse their risk entirely, right? Because our disease process is a combination. It's a dance between, our genetics, which is a component, our lifestyle, and our environmental exposures.
Right.
So all I'm pushing is you can't change your genetics, like you can't change your in-laws, but you can change really your environment. And that is the easiest way I feel that I can make a dent in people's chronic risk for autoimmune disease and all their health conditions.
Our guest today on the Keynote Curators podcast is Dr. Aly Cohen. She is the anti-chemical warrior and an environmental health expert. Dr. Cohen shares a very personal story about how one of her pets became ill. And in the process of healing her animal, she was able to discover how to use her expertise in rheumatology and her knowledge of chemicals to improve the health of her patients. This conversation will make you smarter. You'll learn a lot that you haven't known about everyday life that can improve your health immediately and have a direct, lasting impact. Listen in and learn. We're so happy to have you, and thanks for joining us on the Keynote Curators podcast. So welcome everybody to Curated Insights with Seth Dechtman. Our guest, Dr. Aly Cohen, is with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Aly.
Thank you so much for having me, Seth.
We met on the internet, and we met through a connection of a connection of a connection. It feels so modern for two less than modern people from a generation that's less than modern, no?
Yeah, no, listen, I usually need my kids to, my 12-year-old is my IT rep. So he helps me with I pay him in gummy bears.
Right, exactly.
But he's,
Right, or help on the extra credit homework in math.
Absolutely. You got to work it, you got to bargain.
It's kind of like we got connected. Your connection liked a connection of my connection, and my post liked somebody who posted something that you liked, and that's how we met. So I feel like it's
the internet. The power of the internet. See, this is one of the positive things from the internet.
Yeah, and it's cool. And we had some connections all in the world of not just specifically you as a physician and your specialties, but, in the world of health and well-being, which I think has really taken quite a focus during the pandemic. Self-care, the conversation has expanded, at least from my view, just somebody, who does not practice medicine, how broad the conversation has become, from meditation and people naming terms like cortisol or healthy habits of sleeping or having better water and eliminating toxins and chemicals in our day-to-day life. It really has it has grown. Would you say that?
Well, it's grown for quite a bunch of reasons, most of which we can think of in terms of just people dying from COVID and really just, we look back and it's almost shocking to see, what went on around the world. But it pointed a spotlight on a very important issue, which is, where are we at baseline with our human health? So that when and if, which is more when than if, the next, exposure to a infectious etiology comes at us, how are we going to fare? It's one thing to be kind of a chronic diabetic, chronic hypertensive, chronic high, hyperlipidemic with high cholesterol. But when those things actually, which are inflammatory disorders, often affected by our environment and the chemicals that I research and write books about, when those inflammatory conditions are our baseline, then really the insults to the human body can cause quite an explosion in terms of that inflammatory response. So we have to think about how are we going to get healthier overall at baseline on a day-to-day basis without insults from the environment, which includes, as you mentioned, clean drinking water and processed foods. And then the cosmetics that we put on our skin, our feminine care products that we actually put on and inside our bodies. And then there's even materials in our home and couches and that kind of thing. So the idea is to work with people to get people to just, number one, be aware that this is really a thing. And then to really work on how do we start to slowly chip away at those exposures that really create an inflammatory baseline or an inflammatory illness at baseline.
Yeah, I've heard that term a lot, even pre-pandemic, kind of getting into the mainstream, inflammatory. And you hear people taking I don't know, omega-3 as, as a way to lessen your inflammation, if you will. But omega-3, I mean, I'm kind of getting into the deep end here, is not an anti-inflammatory.
Well, actually, it is. I mean, the substance of omega-3, which has to be incredibly pure, has to be incredibly concentrated for the components that make it of value, like DHA and EPA, which are very important fatty acids. Those are often watered down in conventional products. I mean, so any big box store, big box pharmacy you walk into is going to have fish oil, but it's going to have really kind of a watered down version because to source it is so difficult, to source it well and to remove PCBs and microplastics and contaminants from fish is a really difficult thing. So certain supplements which do have health benefits are rather ineffective if they're not done in terms of the quality, if they're not used from, understanding the quality and the sourcing and the vetting, the third party oversight in terms of quality and quantity. So to your point, omega-3 is a really healthful substance if it's done right. But
Right.
interestingly enough, so many people are taking stuff very similar to the idea of taking medicines to sort of fix the problem. And again, they have their role. And of course, I'm a rheumatologist, so I can't solve every problem in rheumatology, lupus and rheumatoid and autoimmune diseases with just all natural necessarily approach. And that's it. In many cases, they may require a medication to quiet their active disease or chronically to manage. But so much of what we do is adding in something quickly. I mean, that was the impulse during COVID.
Right.
Was to,
Right.
Supplements are going to boost my immune system. Well, guess what? As an immunologist, we don't necessarily always want to boost our immune system at the wrong time because that may be the time when we're most inflamed. So we really need to not only know how to remove the components that kind of affect our immune system wrongly in a negative way. That's the first step in my world, is remove the things that are actually the problem. And then you can start to focus on what do you need to add in that would be helpful and to the right person at the right time. And that was discovered in COVID amongst practitioners is really when should those therapeutics actually be added? Because the timing mattered in terms of
Right.
the way that the infection really plays out on individuals.
Right. So it's not just taking, I don't know if it's supplements or medication willy-nilly. You're saying that's fine, it has its place, but underneath that, getting to the root cause of it all, it might be eliminate what we're adding in that's causing the inflammation. And is that the case? And if so, is that diet? I mean, are you pointing to diet or does it go beyond that?
Well, it depends on the audience I'm talking to because you have to meet patients where they're at. And I find that some patients don't know what a vegetable is, and then some patients can school me on everything. So
Right.
I think you have to talking to and where you can intervene as a clinician or a healthcare provider. So I've learned to figure that out based on how they respond to me and my comments and questions. But, the idea is that so much of what we have to do is kind of deduce. We have to get down to why are we here in the first place? Let's talk about, for instance, I'll give you an example. During COVID, during the beginnings of COVID, before we really had a handle on things, myself and my partner were really the first to get out there and talk about the inflammatory components of environmental chemicals. And specifically, we talked about ultra-processed foods and the chemicals, which in the United States are completely unregulated. I mean, people don't realize that the chemicals, and there are over 10,000 food additives that are allowed in the food market into our products in the United States that actually require no testing for safety or toxicity. They're under the heading of generally regarded as safe or GRAS. And it's on the onus of the manufacturer of whatever compound that is to figure out or reveal if there's any safety issues. So if you don't test them, you don't need to reveal anything, technically. So we have these chemicals that are in mostly ultra-processed foods or processed foods. And those chemicals, when they're tested by third-party academic sites, international bodies that are looking, that are not,
Right.
have no skin in the game, they really are just salaried academic researchers, which is where I get my material from. When they find a certain substance, such as a food additive, is harmful to children, to pregnant women, for developmental reasons, for cancer risk, et cetera, it's really, we have to think about getting rid of those chemicals that are well published to be a problem, such as bisphenol A. Most people have heard about BPA that was
Sure.
taken out of plastic baby bottles in 2012. Well, if it was so harmful to the growth and development of babies, shouldn't it be taken out of all of our canned foods and drinks, perhaps?
Right.
because that's where it resides in canned foods. It lines the inside of canned foods and drinks, even organic foods that are canned. But it's also on receipts, and it's also in all of our clothes. It makes plastics flexible and see-through, actually, for
Right. Shower
yeah,
curtains.
that's vinyl. Yeah. I mean, so all of the things that we love that are conveniences, right? We love our stuff. I do too. But we really want to think about how to clean up that stuff in the best way, safest way, most practical, cost effective way possible. And that's a lot of the work I do, is really giving people the idea that here's the problem and here's the solution in the least dramatic, costly way possible. And a lot of it is deducing, it's removing things
Right.
as a sort of adding in, supplements, medication. It's the same idea, is that we add in a lot, cleaning products, because we think we need to be super clean during COVID. Well, in fact, many of the chemicals added into the COVID world. I mean, this cleaning product industry just blew up, right? Because you have the fear when
Right.
soap and water is very effective at breaking down dirt and removing it. And if you're talking about COVID, isopropyl alcohol, 70% or above.
Right.
So I carry around a spray bottle. But
Yeah.
disease like sugar, for instance, like diabetics during COVID, when you said the root cause, well, if you're a diabetic and your sugars are uncontrolled, you have a much higher risk of having worse outcomes, morbidity and mortality from a COVID infection. That was discovered, and plenty of literature to support it. If you are a smoker, because of the A2 receptors that are involved with COVID, especially in the lung, if you're a smoker, you have a higher number of receptors. So you have a higher risk of developing worse outcomes, morbidity, mortality from COVID infection. And so there's been an expanded list from that, but those were the two biggies, because of course, a lot of people are smokers and a lot of people are diabetics, particularly uncontrolled diabetics. And those are the people that were seen to have really the worst outcomes when the beginning of the COVID pandemic began.
Yeah. I mean, meeting patients where they're at. I mean, it's common sense. It's what's appropriate. It's what's warranted. I mean, I don't think any physician would have it any other way. Would you be able to share with our viewers, although I'm asking for a general question and not to meet people where they're at specifically, in the home or in the workplace, because it's become both the home and the workplace during COVID, what are some of the things that we could do to either mitigate some of these toxins, these chemicals that you alluded to, and create more of a thriving, healthy ecosystem within our home and our workspace that has changed during COVID?
So that's a wonderful question. So essentially, physicians, healthcare workers have really, like you said, had to sort of follow people into their homes, into their workplaces, to send messages that were really based on science. Washing your hands for 20 seconds works, and keeping a distance actually makes a difference, and wearing the right kind of masking makes a difference in terms of spread. Vaccines work, are reliable, and have done their job to keep people from getting hospitalized and on respirators and even death. This messaging has to follow people because it's that urgent, and it's based on urgency. The issue of environmental health, which is so interesting, is that a lot of these exposures don't come up and kind of give you a rash or smack you in the face, or, make you aware that there's an ongoing low level risk to your health because you're having, a burger from a fast food here and there, or every day, or, putting on the same cosmetic for 20 years or antiperspirants. It's hard to sell people that low level exposures over time add up to potential risk.
Yeah.
And that's just a tough message to sell because we're an instant gratification culture. I have 2 tween boys, and I hear it every day on Instagram and TikTok and whatever else they're on. These are the kinds of messaging that we're given, right? We have very short clips of information without a lot of context. And I think that one of the big things is creating, at least in my medical practice, which is a little off the grid in the sense that I don't take insurance, for a reason. That was a choice, because I didn't get enough information to my patients in a time period that I thought would matter.
Right.
And so I made that conscious choice with all its risks involved. And I did that because I just didn't want to practice medicine in the standard way, 15-minute appointments, mostly to discuss medications and side effects of those medications, which are worthy conversations, but they're not in great context with anything else. So I really do talk about taking away the low-hanging fruit. When we talk about protecting ourselves from environmental chemicals, one of the easiest things we can talk about, as healthcare practitioners is how do you remove very common products and chemicals that we already know
Right.
can be harmful. We just know
Right.
that. And there are vetted resources, which I talk about with my high school students, my college students, with my patients. I write about them in my book, which is a guidebook. So I'm trying to give people the fishing rod and not just
Sure.
because,
Right. Aly, you talked about low hanging fruit,
yeah.
right? But that's kind of juxtaposed because I hear low hanging fruit and I'm like right away, oh my God, I can knock off a few things, right away. And just academically, conceptually, I'm expanding the health of the ecosystem in which I live and work, which is good news to me. Juxtapose that with the instant gratification, it kind of is where things kind of go head to head. Do you find though, and your clientele, your patients might be a little bit different because they've also chosen to participate outside of let's say, the conventional healthcare system. Do you find that there is a trend towards moving away from the get it fixed right now, take the medicine, and looking at a more holistic, bigger picture type of approach?
Well, I think, up until COVID, probably not so much. I think that we were still kind of moving along in our way where it didn't really bother us. We could keep going in our ways. I think COVID really made everyone stop and think about the long-term picture here. I mean, for not everybody, of course, because now we have financial issues that people are really overwhelmed with, among other
Yeah.
things. So kind of moved some of the crisis to a different topic for some people. But for those who really understand the idea that your underlying health really matters and that perhaps now, if any time, was the time to get in better health and better shape, to get off medications, to get off processed foods, to get a water filter. It's not as complicated as people think. I will say this, that I did this journey. I was a physician practicing for many, many years, and my dog got ill and I didn't know why. And he was young
Yeah.
and healthy until that moment. And really, it was my own heartbreak trying to figure out as an immune specialist why my dog had an autoimmune disease that's unheard of in dogs, autoimmune hepatitis. And through the journey of trying to figure what exposure may have affected his risk and caused him to have an immune system that turned on him, essentially, I was discovering the lack of regulation, not just in his dog food, but in our food, not
Right.
just flea and tick medicine that I put on him, but in the cosmetics that we put on us, on the drinking water we gave him living in New Jersey on a farm, and the drinking water I'm drinking and giving to my children. And so, it really struck a chord with me. And at that time, having been a physician practicing, was never given a course on environmental health, never knew that there even existed a topic of such. And I began a 10-year journey, maybe it's now 10, maybe 9 years, on how does environment affect the human body? And what have the laws done or lack thereof, or the regulatory failures, how have they led to where we are now in terms of chronic illness, inflammation, and potential risk for harm,
Yeah.
especially a pandemic?
Yeah. I'm laughing at myself, the TV show House,
Yeah.
when they kind of got stuck in their investigations, he would send them to the patient's home.
Interesting. Yeah.
And they would kind of open up the refrigerator, look in cabinets, and they would find stuff. And
It makes sense.
yeah, it makes look, it's a TV show, but there is some basis of reality. It was successful, and people really plugged into it. And I always found that fascinating, where I connect that kind of idea or approach to those who are, let's say, more of a boomer age or a little bit longer on in the lifespan, and they're moved to, let's say, a facility or some type of other environment than their typical home. And the place is painted fresh and there's all this new material, and that has a real toxic impact on somebody's body. Not only the obvious things, the lead in the paint and some of these countertops that emit gases, but just the abrupt change in the environment seems to also have that kind of impact, and things to look out for. Can you talk a little bit about specifically some of the products that we use in our home? I mean, I know you alluded to it earlier, the cleaning and everything like that, but just some specific tips, and I don't want to call them tricks, but some direction for our viewers that can maybe are plugged into, or are interested in hitting some of that low hanging fruit that
Sure.
make a big
I'll talk
impact.
about Absolutely. One of the, I can remember exactly the moment when I pulled out a drawer in my kitchen and threw out an entire drawer of plug-in air fresheners. And I was
Ah,
so thrilled to have 20 different flavors, mountain breeze and cherry blossom, ocean this, and,
right,
prairie
right. Wind in my hair. Oh, wait, that can't happen. That can't
spice
happen to me.
holiday, peppermint spice. And, I had so much fun as a young mom, relatively newly married, just filling a beautiful home with all the things that I thought made a home a home. The smells, the holidays, and the day that I emptied that drawer, literally like 15 or 20 of them just waiting to come up for the next season was like earth shattering to me because
Right.
fragrances have an enormous number of
Yeah.
chemicals that are very harmful to human health. And we're talking about particularly a group called phthalates,
Sure.
PHTALATES. And phthalates have been incredibly well studied around the world by my colleagues who have written chapters in my textbook with Oxford and also researchers from every continent in the world. And so we know that phthalates as a class of compounds really have very deleterious effects on the human endocrine system, on our hormones, and can actually mimic many of the human hormones that we have, which are messengers around the body, at very low levels of exposure. And phthalates, their chemical purpose is to really keep fragrances lasting longer, is one aspect. Cosmetic colors brighter for a longer period of time. So it's shelf life ability. And, we have fragrances even in our clothing material when we buy them. They're now getting doused with odors. When you walk outside of some of the stores that the teenagers buy clothes at in the mall, they're spraying cologne in the hallway.
Yeah.
Which, in certain states like California, you cannot even mail a magazine with perfume in it anymore because it's considered harmful to people with asthma and acute respiratory issues. Even the workplace has its new laws and regulations where you can't wear cologne or perfume that can irritate or upset someone else in the workforce, in the workplace. So the idea that we want to smell better and yet maybe we don't want to do the work of cleaning the space or cleaning our bodies is something we should all think about. And my 2 teenage boys should be thinking about. But the idea is that you don't want fragrances in your life, artificial synthetic fragrances in your life. There are rules for organic, 100% organic essential oils. But even those two, you have to be very careful because there are no laws regulating the content of that 100%. Of who's managing that oversight for real truth to that versus even having one ingredient like in cosmetics and saying it has organic ingredients, but also having 95% of it junk and chemicals that are harmful.
Right.
So this is the kind of work we have to wade through and what I teach and in my books and in environments where I can grab ears. Because if you can remove fragrance, whether it's air fresheners, sprays, candles, incense, plugins, if you can remove the fragrance that is pervasive in cleaning products. If you can just remove those by choosing fragrance-free, if you can go back to basic cleaning products like baking soda and sea salt for scrubbing and real lemon juice and borax and Castile soap, and there's just a whole list of really non-toxic ingredients, you can get to a better place. You can even look up, like me, I don't have time to make products anymore. Like I used to do it just for fun, try to see if I could do it, but I don't have time anymore. So now there's vetted sites that we put in our materials and that really give people vetted evergreen information that as the product lines might change, so too will that information so that people make smart decisions. And that's all of this is about being smart. It's about making smarter, easier choices. And that's why I started the Smart Human platform, because the Smart Human, which sells nothing, endorses nothing in terms of brands, is really meant to teach people that there's not a lot you can't do in terms of reducing those body burdens of exposure. And even though certain chemicals have longer half-lives than others, you can work to lower those levels. I've done it on my own body. I've done it on my patients. So behaviors matter. They change your chemistry of your body, which changes and lowers the risk for many harmful health conditions that we're now facing and will be facing more moving forward.
And your body changes, right? Are you measuring that by blood, by urine, by both?
So there are tests that are commercial that are relatively good for consumers. And so that's measuring blood and urine depending on the chemical compound you're looking at. So some chemicals like pesticides may be better looked at through the blood. But for instance, BPA, which actually has a half-life of about 8 hours, if you were to, breaks down as opposed to other chemicals that do not break down, like the perfluoroalkyls, the BPA you can actually measure in the urine. And actually some of the best studies ever done with people who drink sodas every day or have canned soup every day at the same time, some of these great studies show that when you give up habits like reducing the same canned soup in the experiment every day and you just use fresh made soup, lower BPA levels in your urine by 1,100% in a week. So there are real potential health benefits to making simple changes, but you just need to know what they are so that you don't go crazy. There are just 95,000 chemicals that we now have in our environment and all of our products in the United States. So no one is supposed to be, I don't intend for anyone to think like an actual toxicologist entirely,
Right.
but we want to know the vetted resources, simple, helpful information, and it has to be real. It can't be endorsed or bought by, I think,
I mean, look, we're kind of the same generation, but I don't think 30 years ago in the mainstream vernacular, people were talking about bisphenol A or phthalates or somebody of my level of medical education, which is kind of Tylenol and floss my teeth and drink as much water as I can and eat as many green vegetables, that I do know about phthalates and bisphenol A and omega-3 and the body oxidizing or being inflamed and some of the markers to kind of keep my eyeball out for. So I think that coming full circle, the breadth and expanse of the well-being conversation, people are more informed. It does require us to act. Right? I mean, look, there's a balance between, can we get to zero bisphenol and zero phthalates in our life? Is that possible? I don't know. But I think that what you're saying is we can get the low-hanging fruit, start from there, begin to trim away what really is having this slow burn, long-term impact on our health and well-being, and then kind of attack it from there. I don't want to reduce it into a little soundbite, but is that kind of what your posture is?
Yes. So I have come full circle from wow and oh my God, I'm on the ledge. And what do I do, from learning so much information that was just overwhelming to, you know what? We are all trying to just survive, make a living, take care of our family, keep everyone healthy, keep a job, try not to get injured. I mean, we are all trying to survive. So the messaging that I'm at, maybe because of my age, maybe because I like to color my hair still, I don't know. But the messaging that I'm giving audience.
Me too, by the way.
I might have got your hair. You might have sent it to me. But, it's one of those messages where it was a shocking curve of understanding, learning, and then what do I do about it? And really that book was therapeutic. And what I'm doing now is therapeutic because I'm telling people you can make changes from just through very high yield choices, just high yield choices, whether it's removing chemicals from cleaning products or swapping out air fresheners for something a little less toxic, opening windows, adding plants for air quality. But you can get a water filter that will reduce an enormous amount of contaminants in our drinking water, which is really a hot mess, to be honest with you. And so when you remove the high yield exposures, we all drink tons of water every day. Why shouldn't we get that right? Eating healthy food, there's always a way to sneak in a vegetable that's organic or washed off from all of the pesticide residues. What's the point of eating great broccoli and Brussels sprouts and cruciferous vegetables that are detoxifying if they're laden with toxins? The ironies run deep. And so, I went to the gym for a while before pandemic and, I would work out and then I'd get into the shower and they'd have these free samples of shampoo, body spray, body wash, and conditioner. And they were just loaded with chemicals.
Yeah.
I just worked out to get this crap out of my body.
Yeah.
So the idea is that when you start to, little by little survey your life, survey your home, look and think about what you actually throw on every day without much thought, you just chip away at it little by little.
Right.
And look, no one is going to reverse their risk entirely, right? Because our disease process is a combination. It's a dance between, our genetics, which is a component, our lifestyle, and our environmental exposures.
Right.
So all I'm pushing is you can't change your genetics, like you can't change your in-laws, but you can change really your environment. And that is the easiest way I feel that I can make a dent in people's chronic risk for autoimmune disease and all their health conditions. I also make the point, I really believe in anthropology. I loved my anthropology training. I think anthropology should be part of every medical school experience. We didn't just plop here with nice great cologne. We've been evolving for millions of years. We have wonderful processes in the body to detox, to remove chemicals or insults to the body. But when we now have 95,000 chemicals just in the last 100 years of our entire existence of 4.5 million years, that's a lot for the body to handle. And that's when we start to have problems, inflammation, chronic health conditions, they start to creep up. And we're having acute ones as well. Of course, we have food allergies that run rampant with children and adults. We have acute asthma and allergies from air pollution and chemicals in products. So, we have a real dilemma on our hands. All I want people to do is think, you know what? Let's think about pulling some of this stuff out of our bodies and out of our lives and environments. And you know what? You won't miss them. Trust me.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned water among many things, and pardon the pun here, I'd like to go into the deep end a little bit more. I know this is one of your passion points. Provide us, instruct us, inform us, educate us, transform our relationship to the water that we're drinking and how we can take action right away, and it can be transformative for our health.
So just to put it really quickly and clearly into context, in the United States, we get our drinking water, as most people listening would know, from either municipal tap, which is these wastewater treatment plants. There's 160,000 in the United States that serve pretty much 80% of the US population. And then we also have this potential of having wells as our source of drinking water, which are typically contained, but not always, in the ground. And they have their own risks in terms of flooding and contamination from, agriculture and chemicals, and anything that's from an aquifer or streams that get into wells can potentially be problematic. So we have these two sources. And, the problem with the water treatment plants is that we still follow a law for those 160,000 water treatment plants called the Safe Drinking Water Act, and that was passed in 1974. And we have had very little to no change in that act since 1974, almost 50 years, that we have not had any additional chemicals, because right now they only monitor, since then, 91 chemicals.
Wow.
And I'm talking about monitoring, meaning picking up that the chemical is in the water source and remediating it and bringing it down to a level that the EPA deems safe, which is another area of argument, okay? Because again, how high that level is considered to be problematic is of dispute in terms of human health.
Sure.
So we have 91 chemicals monitored, and only 50 years since, and it still hasn't changed, but we have 95,000 chemicals that get into our drinking water, from coal ash, fracking chemicals, agriculture, manufacturing, sewage. Did you know sewage comes right back into our municipal wastewater treatment plants to get cleaned off, but it doesn't have the capability, the infrastructure. So we have in our water, in our tap water, we can have oral contraceptive breakdowns. We can have blood pressure pills with schizophrenia. You name the medication, that can be there too. So with all of the stuff that can get back in that's never been washed off really to begin with, from lakes and streams and everything that feeds these wastewater treatment plants and the wells, the best thing we can do as a human, as a consumer, is to control the quality of our water at the point of use, which is at our sinks. Right. So no matter where that water comes from, whether it comes up from a well or it comes 30 miles away from a water treatment company, we have the ability to control the cleanliness of that water, which has chlorine and a bunch of other necessary additions in order to clean off bacteria, or else we'd have rampant disease, but we can control it at the point of use. And so my big messaging after going through all of this tirade is that we have to clean our own water, because that's really the best way to do it. It's much less costly than even buying bottled water, which has its own risk because of plastic chemicals. Right. The variety of filtration varies in terms of its abilities to remove certain chemicals, from even a pitcher filter, which is excellent, many of them, all the way to the more extreme, which is the reverse osmosis, which runs about $275 now. It used to be much more expensive. And we have access to that as long as it's certified and NSF certified. So, the idea is that we now have a lot more control over the water quality that goes into our bodies. And if we do it the right way, it's very, very cheap. It just has some upfront costs.
Right. That's so important, because it's such a simple thing. And I mean, it's the fountain of our life, the metaphor intended. I mean, right at your kitchen sink, you can put something in place that's going to impact in such a long lasting, positive way your health Point us to where we could learn more about a lot of these environmental health topics.
Well, I would say that, I mean, to toot my own horn, but of course, I'm just a communicator. I don't look at myself as doing the research. I'm the communicator of where does this research play out in terms of the front lines of medical care where I am and treating young people that have diseases they should not have. Or
Right.
autoimmune diseases that have no family history and they're just de novo out of coming to me. So, my feeling is that I have to get upstream. And, so I wrote a book and, of course I have my notes because I'm so old, I forget all my details. But,
Right.
this book really was the book that it took me about 9 years to write and about a year and a half with my co-author to really put it together. And to me, that's the playbook on the best resources for searching for couches, the best resources for understanding food labels. I have a whole chapter on radiation, on how to manage our tech toys safely. I have a chapter on medications, not because they're all terrible, but because we should know the difference between the necessary ones and the unnecessary.
Right.
So my resources are really the book, the textbook that I wrote as well with my partner, Dr. 𝗷𝗆 𝗖𝗵𝗲. And then, of course, the Smart Human is really my baby. That's the educational environmental health platform that I started out of sheer frustration and has since grown to be really just a public health resource so that people can get nuggets Monday, Wednesday, Friday on various topics from mental health all the way to chemicals and water filters.
That's great. Is there anything else that we've missed or that you're burning to share with us that you're really excited about, something that's recent for you or that you feel that would fill a glaring gap that would provide something that would make a difference for us?
I think that good work often tends to attract, real true work attracts attention from other good workers and people with passion. I've had the fortunate, ability to work with Fran Drescher, who started Cancer Schmancer. We have become fast friends. But I've also worked with Environmental Working Group and disease prevention groups that really see the importance of this work and to reach younger people. My TED Talk talked about getting this type of curriculum into schools across the country,
Yeah.
high schools, middle schools. Medical schools, unfortunately, are not as open to this material or even dietary information, even now, unfortunately, because they really do gear their testing and their training towards the board exams. So
Right.
which are really disease diagnosis and treatment. So, I've really felt that the best way to get, to make a change in the world, to help people from getting sick is essentially getting to people younger and before they make decisions to have kids and think about what they put in
Sure.
there. So really my passion has just helped me connect with a lot of really, I think, important groups. And I'm hoping to continue that work as I move forward in my career.
Well, continue expanding on a strong foundation. I know the little that we've been connected, I've been fascinated by not only your expertise and your passion, but the care and the real genuine concern that comes through. And every time I talk to you, which hasn't been that many, or that I've read your blog or seen one of your posts, I always walk away smarter. So I appreciate that. And I know that there's a lot of work. You come from a conventional medical background. You've transformed over time and people have appreciated it and thanked you for it. And there's no one right lane, no one correct kind of avenue or pathway. As you've been appreciated and thanked, Aly, along the way, it's very nice to hear. But I just want you to be left with this: young Aly Cohen, doctor.
Young.
All the things that you've had to give up against your instincts or that you've had to work on outside of the view of the conventional world to get to where you are now and stand so strongly with your conviction, and all the things that nobody sees that you do to provide all these great resources to the people that you haven't been thanked for. I want to thank you for that, because I'm telling you, you make a difference and it's important work. So keep it going, and we need you and everything that you're doing out there.
I'm quelling, Seth. Thank you so much. I have to tell you, I don't get this at home as I get yelled at from my 2 kids and my husband walks out the door. Thank you, Seth, for making an old lady very happy today. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. You're very, very welcome. If you'd like to learn more about this speaker, visit our website at thekeynotecurators.com. There you'll find dozens of videos of speakers that are a perfect fit for your event. If you'd like to reach out directly, please click on the link below in the description. My name is Seth Dechtman, and you've been watching Curated Insights.